Hello, I'm Jesus Saenz. Welcome to the San Antonio International Airport. I'm the airport director, and I'm pleased to be standing here with Rob Lowe, the regional administrator for the FAA's Southwest region. We're here to invite you to sit back, relax, and learn more about the exciting proposal the FAA has for our community. It improves the way aircraft arrive and depart from our airport, which makes operations safer and also more efficient. Safer, more efficient arrivals and departures bring in more jobs, visitors, and business for our community.
That's right, Jesus. I'm excited to be here with you. It's our pleasure to work hand in hand with your team for the betterment of the San Antonio community. After all, nobody knows your community better than the people of San Antonio. The FAA is in the process of modernizing the national airspace system with the use of satellite-based navigation as the primary method of directing air traffic. It's replacing the conventional system, which includes ground-based navigational aids.
These satellite-based procedures are extremely precise. They give pilots and air traffic controllers greater situational awareness, which enhances safety but also allows for enhanced route planning. This means passengers will see reduced delays at time of departure and reduced flying time to their destinations. An added benefit of less fuel burn means a reduction of carbon emissions. Using satellite-based procedures is also more cost-effective than the ground-based radar system.
We will focus on arrival and departure procedures in the airspace around San Antonio, and we will discuss what you might expect as these new procedures are introduced.
We know one of your concerns may be potential noise impacts of any changes in and around the San Antonio area. We share your concerns, and we want you to know that we do not want to bring unnecessary noise to the area.
Yes, absolutely, Jesus. We want you to know that we are performing an environmental assessment to analyze potential noise impacts. Once we have the results of that study, we will be sharing them with you. So let us tell you about this proposal. Here are 2 videos which will detail these proposed procedures. After the videos, we will go into a live panel question and answer period with subject matter experts from the FAA, along with our industry partners who are here to answer your questions about this project.
So sit back, relax, and get your questions ready. We hope this presentation and the live question and answer period will provide value to you and the rest of the community members. Thank you.
San Antonio, Texas has a rich heritage, and the San Antonio International Airport is the gateway to this vibrant community. The FAA is proposing to modernize the flight paths into and out of this airport. This proposal is part of a nationwide strategy to modernize the entire national airspace system. It would help bring in aircraft quicker and reduce delays. In the past, aircraft flew point to point by passing over ground-based navigational aids. However, many of these ground-based aids are now old, inefficient, and costly to maintain. Therefore, the FAA is proposing to replace them with satellite-based procedures. These new procedures allow pilots and controllers to use more direct routes, which can help the environment by reducing fuel burn. One of the procedure types, the Standard Terminal Arrival Procedure, or STAR, has built-in speed and altitude requirements, which are programmed into the airplane's flight computers. They allow the aircraft to essentially glide down on idle power. This is called an Optimized Profile Descent, or OPD. It's like driving a car from a highway to an exit ramp and then a neighborhood street, but seamlessly and without stopping. Placing an aircraft on a continuous and predictable path improves safety and efficiency. San Antonio has 3 runways. Runway 422 runs southwest to northeast. Runway 13 right, 31 left runs from the southeast to the northwest. There is also a shorter parallel runway next to 13 right, 31 left, and it is designated as 13 left, 31 right. Aircraft take off and land into the wind, and runways are built to align with historic wind patterns specific to each airport. At San Antonio, winds primarily come from the southeast. However, winds can come from the north or even the west, which will change the direction in which the aircraft will take off and land. General runway identification is based on the compass heading the aircraft is facing as it lands or takes off. For example, runway 422 is facing approximately 40 degrees in one direction and 220 degrees in the opposite direction. If you drop the 0 at the end of the compass heading, you will get 4 and 22. Even though a runway is a single strip of concrete, it is essentially treated as two separate surfaces. Parallel runways are further designated with L for left or R for right at the end of the runway number, which explains runways 13 right, 31 left, and 13 left, 31 right. Air traffic controllers work in three-dimensional space to keep planes safely separated vertically and horizontally. They continually space and separate arrivals and departures. Satellite-based procedures make that job safer and more efficient because the separation requirements can now be incorporated within the procedure. Creating and publishing new flight procedures is a multi-step process. Federal law and FAA policy requires the FAA to conduct an environmental review in accordance with the National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA. We hope this video gives you a basic understanding of how the air traffic control system works in the San Antonio airspace. For more information, please visit the San Antonio page on the FAA's Community Involvement website.
Hello, my name is Travis Schulhorn, and I'm an air traffic control specialist at the FAA San Antonio International Airport Control Tower, or ATCT. I've been actively involved in air traffic within the San Antonio airspace for the last 12 years. We will walk you through the flight procedure poster boards for the proposed arrival and departure procedures at San Antonio International Airport. Each of the following boards shows a sampling of proposed approach and departure procedures. Most boards also show existing flight tracks. Each board will show either arrival or departure aircraft with current day tracks color-coded in blue. Each proposed arrival procedure will also be shown on two separate boards, one providing a zoomed-out view and another showing a zoomed-in view to show additional detail. The flight tracks and procedures are all overlaid on a map of the surrounding area. Each flight procedure board is oriented with north facing up. The name of each flight procedure is shown by an arrow on the map containing a 5-letter name. Arrows for arrival procedures point towards the airport, while arrows for departure procedures point away from the airport. For example, this board shows 5 departures: the Alice, Yoda, Snyder, Timo, and Tejano. These are called SIDs, or Standard Instrument Departures. A few acronyms are used by air traffic controllers explaining the boards and in the text. The spelling of each departure procedure is limited to 5 letters. For example, the spelling of the Alice departure is pronounced Alice. The stars on the board are locations of waypoints, which are fixed navigational points in space that aircraft fly to. Just as with the spelling of procedures, waypoints are spelled with 5 letters. For example, the Tater waypoint would be pronounced Tater. The proposed flight procedures are colored purple for departures and orange for arrivals. These colored paths show the proposed flight paths. Surrounding the paths are dispersed path areas in either pink for departures or yellow for arrivals. These areas show the possible locations where aircraft may fly and account for the possibility of different routing to avoid hazardous weather, for operational need, or for safety. When aircraft fly in these areas, it is typically due to a pilot receiving a compass heading from air traffic control. A vector is a compass heading assigned to an aircraft by an air traffic controller at San Antonio TRACON or the airport tower. The proposed procedures will use satellites for guidance instead of ground-based navigational aids. For arriving aircraft, once the standard terminal arrival route, or STAR, controllers may give the pilot a vector to the final approach or fly the entire procedure and would be issued the R&P approach. RNP is an acronym for Required Navigation Performance that allows properly equipped aircraft to fly the precise routes all the way to the runway. San Antonio International Airport currently has 4 RNP approach procedures that are utilized by properly equipped aircraft. These are shown in teal on the maps. Aircraft arriving or departing may be vectored off their procedure for operational need, safety, or for hazardous weather. Aircraft that are vectored are given a different heading to fly than the published procedure. However, controllers would use these proposed procedures as published whenever air traffic conditions allow. The bullet points on the right side provide additional details about the procedure. This board shows an overview of the proposed arrival and departure procedures in the greater San Antonio area. These paths generally follow where aircraft arrive and depart today, especially in areas within a few miles of the airport. As we walk through the boards, we'll talk about each of the operational flows, which is what we call the primary direction aircraft arrive and depart. Primarily, aircraft land and depart into the wind. However, many other factors such as route of flight, weight of aircraft, runway closures, and velocity of wind are also considered, which permit aircraft to arrive or depart other runways to achieve operational advantages. For example, at San Antonio, aircraft may land on one runway and take off on another, such as landing on runway 13 right and departing on runway 4. This board shows an overview of the proposed arrival and departure procedures in relation to military airspace in the greater San Antonio area. Randolph Air Force Base is located 12 miles from San Antonio International Airport and is depicted on the map with the label RND. The large areas of military airspace depicted by the shaded regions are used for military training. The proposed procedures are designed to generally avoid these areas. However, civilian aircraft can fly through these military operation areas, or MOAs, if flying under visual flight rules. This board shows a zoomed-out view of the existing flight tracks and proposed departure procedures called SIDS for aircraft departing to the southeast on runway 13 right. Aircraft departing on runway 13 right will initially fly a compass heading given by an air traffic controller to a waypoint. This initial heading is called a vector. From the waypoint, aircraft will continue their departure by following the SID. Aircraft will continue to depart and climb out as they do today, close into the airport below 10,000 feet, while maintaining the existing voluntary noise abatement procedures. Runway 13 right is a commonly used runway because the winds are often from the southeast, and it is safest for aircraft to land and to depart into the wind. This board shows a zoomed-out view of the existing flight tracks and proposed arrival procedures called STARS for aircraft arriving to the southeast on runway 13 right. Aircraft landing on runway 13 right will fly the STAR to a waypoint where they are then given a vector by controllers to the final approach to land. Aircraft will continue to arrive as they do today using similar routes. Just as aircraft depart on runway 13 right due to the direction of wind, aircraft also land on runway 13 right when the wind direction is from the southeast. This board shows a zoomed-in view of the existing flight tracks and proposed STARS for aircraft arriving to the southeast on runway 13 right. This board shows a zoomed-out view of the existing flight tracks and proposed SIDS for aircraft departing to the northeast on runway 4. Aircraft departing on runway 4 will initially fly a vector given by air traffic control to a waypoint. From the waypoint, aircraft will continue their departure by following the SID. Aircraft will continue to depart and climb out as they do today, close into the airport below 10,000 feet while maintaining the existing voluntary noise abatement procedures. Aircraft depart on runway 4 year-round, flying initially to the northeast, joining a SID to guide them to their destination. The proposed SIDS are being implemented as part of the FAA's modernization of the National Airspace System. These SIDS are used by San Antonio International Airport, Randolph Air Force Base, as well as other smaller airports. This board shows a zoomed-out view of the existing flight tracks and proposed STARS for aircraft arriving to the northeast on runway 4. Aircraft landing on runway 4 will fly the STAR to a waypoint and are then given a vector to the final approach to land. Aircraft will continue to arrive as they do today using similar routes. Aircraft arrive on runway 4 year-round when the winds come from the north. This board shows a zoomed-in view of the existing flight tracks and proposed STARS for aircraft arriving to the northeast on runway 4. This board shows a zoomed out view of the existing flight tracks and proposed SIDs for aircraft departing to the southwest on runway 22. Aircraft departing on runway 22 will initially fly a vector given by air traffic controllers to a waypoint. From the waypoint, aircraft will continue their departure by following the SID. Aircraft will continue to depart and climb as they do today close into the airport below 10,000 feet while maintaining the existing voluntary noise abatement procedures. Runway 22 is used when winds are from the southwest. This board shows a zoomed out view of the existing flight tracks and proposed stars for aircraft arriving to the southwest on runway 22. Aircraft landing on runway 22 will fly the star to a waypoint and are then given a vector to the final approach to land. Aircraft will continue to arrive as they do today using similar routes. This board shows a zoomed-in view of the existing flight tracks and proposed stars for aircraft arriving to the southwest on runway 22. This board shows a zoomed-out view of the existing flight tracks and proposed SIDs for aircraft departing to the northwest on runway 31 left. Aircraft departing on runway 31 left will initially fly a vector given by air traffic controllers to a waypoint. From the waypoint, aircraft will continue their departure by following the SID. Aircraft will continue to depart and climb out as they do today close into the airport, below 10,000 feet, while maintaining the existing voluntary noise abatement procedures. Runway 31 left is used when winds come from the north, which is typically during the winter months. This board shows a zoomed out view of the existing flight tracks and proposed stars for aircraft arriving to the northwest on runway 31 left. Aircraft landing on runway 31 left will fly the star to a waypoint and are then given a vector to the final approach to land. Aircraft will continue to arrive as they do today using similar routes. As with aircraft departing on runway 31 left, aircraft arriving on this runway is common in the winter months due to the predominant wind direction being from the north and northwest. This board shows a zoomed-in view of the existing flight tracks and proposed SARs for aircraft arriving to the northwest on runway 31 left.
Hello, I'm Christy Rigatti, and I'm an Environmental Protection Specialist with the FAA in the Southwest region. Per federal guidance in the National Environmental Policy Act, referred to as NEPA, the FAA is required to evaluate categories of potential environmental, social, and economic effects of a proposed federal action. According to NEPA, these SIDs and STARs are a proposed federal action. The environmental level of review for this proposed action will be an environmental assessment, or EA. The EA is currently in process, and a draft EA is scheduled to be published for public review and comment later this year. More details of the public ability to review and comment on the EA will be made available on the project website.
Well, good evening, everyone. Hello, I'm Rob Lowe. I'm the Regional Administrator for the FAA Southwest Region. Thank you for participating in our virtual public workshop. I will be the moderator for this discussion, and I look forward to hearing your questions about this proposal. Now, you can submit those questions at any time by entering them into the Q&A or question and answer section in Zoom. Or if you're watching this on Facebook, Twitter, or YouTube, you can enter your questions into the Google form that is on your screen. Please note that these forms are for questions about this proposal only. I will tell you about a separate form for comments later. Before we get started with questions and answers, I'd like to cover 3 procedural items. First, if you're having technical issues connecting to the workshop, you can text our tech support number anytime during the workshop. That number is 949-478-0253. And as a reminder, for our audience that would like to listen in Spanish, in Zoom, click on Interpretation in the lower right of your screen and then select Spanish. To go back to English, click on Interpretation again and select English. For our audience that would like to use closed captions, click on Live Transcript in the lower portion of your Zoom screen. Select Show Subtitle. To remove the closed captions, click on Live Transcripts and click Hide Subtitle again to turn them off. Second, this workshop will last for 60 minutes. We have 2 workshop schedules. We did one yesterday, and then we have one today. And if you'd like, you can watch a recording that we'll talk about here in just a minute. Third, we're also live streaming on the FAA's Facebook and Twitter live feeds and the FAA's YouTube channel. A recording of this workshop will be available on these channels immediately after this broadcast. Now I'd like to introduce our panelists. First, we have Garrick Watson. Garrick is an airspace and procedures support specialist at the San Antonio International Airport Air Traffic Control Tower. Travis Uhlhorn is also here with us. Travis is an air traffic controller at the San Antonio International Airport Air Traffic Control Tower. Joining us this evening from the San Antonio International Airport is Stephen Southers. We also have Trey Turner with us tonight. He's a pilot for Southwest Airlines. And Vivian Nichols is our Spanish language interpreter. We are very excited to discuss some work we're proposing at San Antonio and then answer your questions. I want to make sure that everyone also understands this is the beginning of the conversation, not the end. As the project progresses, there will be other opportunities for the community to learn more and to ask questions and potentially comment on more formalized designs. Everyone you see on this meeting today is committed to continuing this meaningful dialogue with communities. So to that end, let's get to your questions. The first question we have in just a minute, they're still coming in, and we'll get started with the Q&A session here in just a second. We've received a lot of great questions yesterday during our live workshop. So we're going to repeat some of those again tonight. Here's the first one that just came in. What level of environmental review is the FAA working on? Excuse me, it's jumping around. What level of environmental review is the FAA working on to comply with the National Environmental Policy Act? So as we said in the video, for this project, we're conducting an environmental assessment, or an EA, that will evaluate numerous environmental resources in our evaluation, such as air quality, noise, environmental justice, and biological resources. Thank you for entering your questions. Don't forget, you can continue to do that at any time. And Travis, it looks like our next question has come in, might fall into your area of expertise. The question says, I've heard that San Antonio Class C airspace is possibly changing. Are those changes due to these procedures?
No, there will be no Class C changes to our airspace here in San Antonio as a result of these procedures. One of the common questions that we were getting yesterday from some of the local general aviation pilots, and I know it's something that's kind of circulating around on the local message boards, is there is a separate work group that is a group of users that are evaluating the effectiveness of the Class C airspace in some of the surrounding airports. There's been no official proposal there. That's really just a study at this point, and it has nothing to do with this project. This project will not change the Class C airspace at all.
Great, thanks, Travis. I appreciate that. Trey, here looks like a question that might fit for you, sir. The question from our viewer says, how do these procedures change how pilots fly into and out of the airport?
Yeah, thanks, Rob. The reality is that there really is no change to how our pilots will fly in and out of the airport. When we're talking about going from conventional to RNAV procedures, it really just is adding more predictable and repeatable flight paths for aircraft, as well as descent profiles to go along with those flight paths.
Great, thank you, Trey. Appreciate that. Well, Steve, here's a question that maybe you can help us with, sir. It's about the airport. Our viewer says the airport has noise abatement procedures in place. Will these still be used once the new procedures are implemented?
Yes, thank you for asking. The noise abatement departure procedures are voluntary and they affect only departures, not arrivals. The pilots use those as they leave the airport to climb quickly and safely to an altitude that allows them to make a turn of the airplane. And this also reduces noise, and they've been doing that. What the noise abatement procedures won't do is help with any noise farther out in the county that may or may not be caused by the procedures we're talking about here today.
Great. Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. So folks, don't forget, you can submit your questions at any time throughout the process tonight. You can do that by entering them into the question and answer section in Zoom, or if you're on Facebook, Twitter, or YouTube, you can enter your questions into the Google form that's on that screen. So it looks like our next question came in, and Garrick, maybe you can help me with this one if you don't mind, sir. Question says, how do these new procedures affect military operations? And do they only use Randolph, or do they also take off and land at San Antonio?
Well, the procedures that we're proposing do not affect military operations at all. Randolph Air Force Base will remain the same, along with Kelly Air Force Base. They will remain the same as well. All these procedures are doing, they're affecting San Antonio International. Occasionally, the military, like Randolph Air Force Base, they will every once in a while come to San Antonio and land. I think I had mentioned yesterday's meeting that the other day, like I think it was last Friday, Randolph Air Force Base was closed, and so 2 of their aircraft actually landed at San Antonio and parked there for most of the weekend because they had to go on a mission and they came back, and so they utilized San Antonio. But overall, Randolph will stay at Randolph, Kelly will stay at Randolph, and then we service all the airliners and general aviation public.
Great. Thanks, Garrick. I appreciate that. Here's our next question, and it says, will the recording of this presentation and question and answer session be available after the meeting? So yes, absolutely. Immediately after this presentation, a recording of tonight's session or presentation will be available for viewing on the FAA channels on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. So Travis, here's a question for you. And our viewer says, good evening. I saw that this proposal is an alteration of the SIDS and STARS at San Antonio. Will this proposal, if approved, cause any changes in the instrument approach procedures for San Antonio? Specifically, will this proposal affect the RNAV Yankee, the non-RNP, approaches to runways 422 and 13 right, 31 left?
Yeah, so I think we're going to show up. There's a picture from the boards that we were talking about earlier. But the short answer to that question is that the approach procedures are changing just a little bit. We had to move some of the fixes. So if you're a local pilot, maybe you're familiar with the fix Alamo on about a 6-mile final to San Antonio. We were actually able to move that fix in just a little bit closer to the runway. So some of the actually, I think it's the majority of all of the existing instrument approach procedures got brought in a little bit closer to the airport, which saves a little bit of flying miles. Still the same final approach path, though, to the runway, obviously. And some of those other changes were made just to make sure that the new arrival procedures connect with the correct angles with the final approach courses.
Great, thank you. It looks like there, Travis, is the depiction up now, if that helps.
Yeah, so it looks like on that, there actually isn't, on these boards, we don't have the waypoints depicted. A lot of the names of the waypoints are changing anyway, so you may not recognize them. But for the most part, that's not going to change. And as far as for, I think that was part of that was for the RNAV Yankee versus the Zulu. We're still going to have RNAV Yankees for those that cannot fly the Zulus or the ones that have the curved final approach courses. So we will still have a Yankee approach for the RNAV and a Zulu. And then, of course, we'll still have the ILS approaches. That was another common question we had yesterday, that the ILS approaches aren't going anywhere at San Antonio. We'll still have them for all runways except runway 22, which we don't have one even today for that.
Great. Thanks, Travis. I appreciate that. And Travis, while I've got you, if you don't mind, here's another question for you about general aviation. This question says, there are a lot of us general aviation pilots around the area operating at the surrounding airports. Will this affect how GA aircraft get to and from those local airports?
No, not really. If you're flying in and out of one of the smaller general aviation airports in the San Antonio area, you'll still be able to get in and out of those airports just like you do today. The name of the SID may change. It'll still follow pretty much the same flight path as it does today. The SIDs are not climb via, so pretty much anybody with a GPS that's certified for IFR use can use these new departure procedures. There'll just be different names. As far as the arrivals go, if you're flying an aircraft that's equipped to do it, these will also serve most of the general aviation airports in our airspace, and even come in along the same flight paths as you would today. If you are, one of the things we have not quite exactly hammered down yet is which aircraft will be able to use them and which ones won't. And what I mean by that is, if you're flying, say, a Skyhawk, you probably won't be able to descend via. The altitudes and the airspeeds will be a little fast. But perhaps if you're, what we haven't figured out is if you have one of the faster general aviation aircraft, such as a TBM or a Piaggio that can meet those altitudes and speeds, we're still working on how we're going to use those and implement them with the faster general aviation aircraft.
Great. Awesome. Thank you. I know our viewers really appreciate that explanation. Steve, I have a question here for you, sir, that asks about an open house. So our viewer says, I heard about the open house on the Greater Airport Area Regional Center Plan in June 7th. Are these projects related?
They're related in a small way. That project for the Greater San Antonio Area planning effort is actually a zoning and land use. And since the airport's primary motivation is to reduce noise near the airport and to reduce non-compatible uses near the airport, we are participating in the Greater San Antonio Airport Area Plan to help make recommendations about not having residential areas near the airport and things like that. But I don't think we're going to be discussing the performance-based navigation routes at that meeting on June 7th. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Steve. Appreciate that very much. So, Garrick, here's a question that maybe you can help me with, sir. Our viewer says, will the approach angle be increased, and how much will the arrival aircraft spacing be reduced?
All right, so just make it this one short here. So the approach angle, I'm assuming they're just talking about the glide path angle is a 3-degree descent rate at San Antonio International. That is not changing. As a matter of fact, Travis was talking about the final approach fix Alamo. He was using that fix earlier, and that is pretty much not going to be changing at all. There's no change at all. As a matter of fact, on any of the finals, Travis, if you can correct me, I think that's pretty much standardized all the way around. And reference spacing, no, there's no, the FAA has established separation rules that we are required to comply with, and none of those have changed, nor will I foresee in any future of them changing. And so this will not increase or reduce the separation of aircraft following each other down final or into our airspace at all.
Great. Thanks, Garrick. I appreciate that. Our next question relates to the environmental assessment. So let me take a shot at that. Our question says, can you explain the noise analysis portion of the EA? So during the environmental assessment, or EA, we look at several factors during that entire process. We consider air traffic operations, fleet mix, and then we look where aircraft are currently flying, comparing that to the new procedure or the procedure change, and we factor in runway usage as well as numerous other factors. So it's an in-depth process that is a defined process that we'll go through, and I think we may talk about that some more as we go along. But thanks for the question. Great question about the process around the environmental assessment. Don't forget, you can continue to put your questions in at any time, and we would appreciate that. Thank you for the questions you've already submitted. We're getting a lot, and that's exactly what we're looking for. We don't want you to go home tonight with a question that you wished you would have asked and didn't get a chance. So don't forget, you can enter those into the Q&A section in Zoom, or you can use the Google form if you're on Facebook, Twitter, or YouTube. So here's our next question, Trey, and then maybe Travis, if you don't mind, you might fill in behind Trey with the air traffic perspective. But Trey, if you don't mind, the first question here says, how do aircraft use satellite procedures to navigate, and what is ground navigation?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Rob. So satellite navigation is obviously, we have a receiver in the airplane that basically calculates the aircraft's position, by using the satellite constellations, and it's highly accurate. It's very robust, if you will. But the Ground-based navigation is more reliant on radio signals, and the aircraft actually uses VHF radios to pick up a signal from a ground-based station. So that's subject to line of sight and service volume limitations that come along with it. GPS isn't as susceptible to the limitations that ground-based nav aids are limited by.
Great, thank you. Travis, anything you'd like to add from an air traffic control perspective?
No, not really. I guess the only thing that for us as air traffic controllers is it allows us to build procedures and put waypoints along these procedures that we normally wouldn't have with ground-based stations. We would not have been able to use, and so we have a little bit more flexibility here. And a lot of what these procedures are going to do is places where we have to manually step in and tell an airplane to turn. Now, using the GPS systems, we can just build a waypoint based off of a latitude, longitude point in the GPS system, and the airplane can automatically turn at that waypoint, as opposed to us having to tell them to do it.
Gotcha. Very good. Thank you, Travis and Trey. Appreciate that very much. Garrick, here's a question for one of our viewers that lives southwest of the airport. Here's the question. I live southwest of the airport, and depending on the time of year, it seems like certain flight procedures are used more than others. How do airlines decide which procedure to use and which runway to use to take off?
All right, on the recording that when we first started off with, it was talking about aircraft land and depart into the wind. So this is primarily the reason why. So this person lives to the southwest. Everything's seasonal here. During the summertime, the winds are primarily out of the southeast and south. So aircraft will be landing from the northwest to the southeast, which means runway 13 right. Now, the southwest, I'm guesstimating this person is talking about when we're on a runway 4 flow, that's how we call it. And so they'll be landing from the southwest to the northeast. Wintertime, the winds are primarily out of the north. And so aircraft will be vectored, turned, or they'll be on the procedure that we're proposing to the southwest, and then they'll make a turn inbound to San Antonio to the northeast. And aircraft reference the runway usage and things like that. I won't expound too much, Trey. I'll let you go a little bit, but I'll just say air traffic controllers, they have a set of frequencies and what we do, we put the information on these frequencies. It's a computerized voice that we have at San Antonio. And before the aircraft even gets here, the pilots will dial in this frequency and listen to the information. And so they pre-plan and they know which runway, what procedure to use. And so they have everything all set and ready to go. And Trey, I'll leave it at that for you now.
Yeah, Garrick, thanks. Yeah, from our point of view, we do pre-plan, whether it be departures or arrivals. We do listen to what is broadcast by the airport for the runways in use. And we take that information, the ambient conditions, wind, temperature, field elevations accounted for, and some other performance variables that we put in. But we use the available information. It's largely based on wind, runway length, aircraft weight, so forth. But we calculate and put all that together to get our performance solution, either for takeoff or for landing.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Appreciate that very much. Now, here's a question about our FAA project website. So if our support team could display, I believe we have that ready to go. So the question is, what is the FAA website for this project? So here's a great slide that talks about it. And we'll talk more about this at the end. But you can see there's several ways to get your comments to us about this proposal. And if you remember in my opening comments, I talked a little bit about asking questions now and then providing a way for you to comment later. This session, don't forget, is being recorded. So if you didn't quite get all the details and you're kind of curious about some of those pictures, I'd encourage you to go back and watch the recording, and where you can pause and zoom in and look, and you'll notice how that's there. And then when you have some comments or thoughts for us, we desperately love to get those from you. You can do that several ways. First, you can go to the website that's addressed there on the top at faa.gov, and you can see the forward slashes. And I want to tell you that the space between air and traffic, the little underline's kind of hiding it. There's actually an underscore in there. So it's air underscore traffic / community _ engagement / and then SANANT stands for San Antonio. And there's a / at the end. So be sure you get that whole thing in there. We will show that to you again later. You can send us snail mail at the address there on the left that is on Hillwood Parkway in Fort Worth, Texas. Or the most convenient way and the easiest way, which the way I love to do it, pull out your camera and scan the QR code. It'll take you right to the website. And I'll have some additional details here as we get to the end of the session later tonight. And I'll tell you where to go once you get to that website, how to enter your comments. So thank you for that, team. Thanks for sharing those. And we'll come back to that again later. So Travis and Steve, here's a question that just came in that looks like maybe between the two of you, you can maybe combine up on this one. The viewer asks, will the new departures utilize the GA runway? So Travis, maybe you want to start from an air traffic perspective, and Steve, maybe jump in here in a second from a airport perspective.
So the departures really are not based, it doesn't matter which runway you take off of. All the departures will serve their direction that they go, no matter what runway you come off of. Everybody coming off of the runway will be issued either a turn, depending on the type aircraft, what we would call a turner aircraft or a propeller driven aircraft at San Antonio. Our procedure is they get a specific heading that we assign them on the compass when they depart, and then turbojet aircraft, the noisier ones, they stay runway heading. So regardless of whether they come off of the GA runway or they come off of a primary runway, the process will still be the same as it is today. As far as arriving to that runway, there is no instrument approaches specific to that runway. We still will have the ability to circle or to sidestep to that runway off of another approach procedure.
Great, thanks, Travis. Steve, anything you'd like to add about the GA runway?
Yes, that runway is currently, that's the short runway, the GA runway, and it's currently under construction. And it won't actually be ready until next year, but we're working hard to get it ready for our GA pilots and community. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Appreciate that for both of y'all. Now here's a question about noise. Let me take a shot at this one. It says noise has many characteristics. Which noise characteristics will be studied in the environmental study or the EA, environmental assessment? So again, we look at several factors. I mentioned earlier, we look at air traffic operations in total. We look at fleet mix, and by fleet mix, we're talking about what types of aircraft, what types of operations are all in the mix, if you will, of arrivals and departures in the San Antonio area. We look at where the aircraft currently fly today. We compare the new procedure or the procedure change to that, and we factor in runway usage as well as other factors. You remember we talked earlier on the video and in some of our questions about different times of year where the prevailing winds will cause us to primarily favor one direction or the other. All of those things go together into this in-depth process as we study where the noise characteristics are and what, if any, the changes that are being proposed would change what we do today. And so if you've noticed from the boards that we showed you earlier, virtually all of these proposals are very similar to the existing flight tracks that we use today in San Antonio. So Travis, here's a question for you, if you don't mind. Viewer says, over the past few years, aircraft departing from runway 422 to the north began turning west and cutting over residential areas south of Thousand Oaks. Will that procedure continue? And maybe we could bring up slide 9, team, if we could, to help Travis explain this, if you don't mind.
Okay, so when aircraft depart runway 4, like I said earlier, our noise abatement procedure is we don't turn any turbojet powered aircraft until they're at least 3,000 feet. That means they're going to go straight out until they at least get to 3,000 feet. The one caveat on that part is if we need it for separation, you can see on that chart right there, just a few miles to the east of San Antonio is Randolph Air Force Base. Randolph Air Force Base is landing on 1-5 left and right. So if you look at where all those blue lines are at, that's right where Randolph is landing also. So that is the one time when we will departure off of runway 4 may get turned before 3,000 feet, and that's to prevent separation errors from happening between an arrival into Randolph and a departure off of San Antonio. It's pretty close in air traffic and separation standards. And so you can see that the aircraft are going to turn to the northwest if they're going out the Alice departure towards the Treva or the Tater intersection. However, under normal operations, they will not turn until they're out of 3,000 feet. And that is exactly the way we're doing it today. And that plan will not change.
Great. Awesome. And Travis, I noticed earlier you mentioned the aircraft would fly runway heading. And then in this answer, you talked a little bit about going straight out. Are those kind of the same thing?
Yeah, sorry. Sometimes I have to remember flying in air traffic for so long. Yes, runway heading and straight out would be the same thing. So that means when they take off, they're going to continue straight ahead, just like in the same direction that they departed in. And then we will decide when to turn them based on separation standards. And unless we need it for separation standards, the aircraft will not turn until they're at least 3,000 feet.
That's great. Awesome. Thank you for that. And if our team can leave that, oh, we went away. I wasn't quick enough. We'll come back to it. Next time we pop a slide back up, we'll talk a little bit about some of the things you can see on those slides as well when you go back and watch the recording. So don't forget, this session is being recorded, and the recordings will be available immediately after the session on our social media pages and channels. And if you're watching on those, please enter your questions at any time. We've got great questions coming in, and we'd love to have more. So if you have any question at all, please send that in on Facebook, Twitter, or YouTube. You can enter those on the Google form on your screen. And if you're on Zoom, there's a Q&A or question and answer section on Zoom. You can enter your question right there and we will get to it. So thank you for doing that. Thanks for the great questions we already have. And here's one that just came in that says, how can residents participate in the environmental studies? So our draft environmental assessment will be available for public review and comment later this year. We've talked a couple times about the process and what we look at. Comments that are submitted will be reviewed. There will be additional public workshops at that time. So the process around the environmental assessment is pretty standard, and it has several segments to it. So we've talked about what we look at, and then we will have the draft environmental assessment out again for public review and comment, and all of those comments will be reviewed. And at that time, we will have additional public workshops. So stay tuned for that. We will put that information up on the FAA page for San Antonio that we talked about earlier. And if you missed it, we will show that again later. So don't worry, we will show you that. But we want you to stay connected. We want to hear from you, and we want to know what your concerns are. So thank you for being here tonight, and thanks in advance for your comments and questions. Steve, here's a question about runway 13 left. Our viewer is asking, is lengthening runway 13 left part of the current evaluation?
These procedures are not intended to lengthen that runway. We are aware that lots of people would like for us to lengthen that runway. We're currently in discussions with the FAA about whether or not that's possible, considering we're also trying to do a decouple of runway 13 right from runway 422. So as we enter into those discussions with the planning side of the FAA, we will be, I'm sure we're going to urge that we improve that runway. I just don't know if it's justified yet, and we'll have to wait to see how that planning process works out. But I'm pretty sure we have already asked numerous times. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Steve. And if you don't mind, let me kind of probe that just a little bit. So one of the things that we partner with you and your team at San Antonio on is all about safety, right? And so we've talked about safety in the air on some of these procedures. And part of what you just described has to do with surface safety and some of the movements on the ground once aircraft have landed and they're on the taxiways and runways. You used the word decouple between 4 and 13. What does that mean to decouple those runways?
We're going to separate the two runways so that there are fewer incursions. And for those of you who are citizens that don't fly, what it means is that Aircraft will not be turning onto an active runway accidentally because they mistake it for a taxiway or some other pathway for the airplanes, and it'll increase safety for everyone, both people who fly in large commercial passenger airliners and small aircraft, if we can decouple those two runways.
That's awesome. Thanks, Steve. I appreciate you clarifying that. And it's all about safety, right? It's for when all of our citizens and our folks fly from point A to point B through the fantastic San Antonio airport. We're continuing to improve and get better and make it even more safe than it is today, which it's fantastic today. So thank you for that. I appreciate that. Trey, here's a question for you, if you don't mind, about these proposed procedures. How will this change how pilots fly?
Yeah, thanks, Rob. Really, the short answer to that is there is no change to how pilots fly because it's just basic differences in automation management from the pilot's end, and really, it's from our seat anyway. It's just going to be business as usual.
Great, awesome. Thank you very much for that. Here's a question that has to do with the timeline. Let me take a shot at that. Our viewer asked, what is the full timeline from now to implementation? So the procedures we're discussing today are planned for publication in late summer 2023 and will be implemented at that same time. But like we talked before, there's a number of steps and processes where we want to hear from you between now and then. So we've got the environmental assessment going. We'll have that draft out where you can look at and comment on that. We're looking for your comments on these procedures here. We want to hear your questions now. But right now, we're tentatively planning late summer 2023. So thank you for that question. Great question. So let's go down to the next one. Steve, this one might be in your area. Our viewer says, what are your current noise abatement procedures?
The noise abatement procedures that we use at the airport it's published in a booklet that all pilots have access to while they're flying and while they're planning their flights. And it says that the aircraft will climb quickly and quietly to a safe altitude, knowing that there are noise sensitive areas on all sides of the airport, and that when they're in flight, they should be aware of those noise sensitive areas. And I think that most pilots nowadays really do pay attention to that because we want to be good partners with the citizens on the ground, and so that aviation can continue to be a benefit to everybody.
Great. Thanks, Steve. I appreciate that. And we just got a follow-on question to the one I just talked about. Can you describe in a little more detail the process that occurs after these workshops? So I think maybe we could bring the comment slide back up again, if you guys don't mind. Thank you very much. So the environmental assessment, or EA, as I said before, is currently in process. Again, when the draft EA is complete, it will be available to the public to review and comment. We also plan to host additional workshops during the EA comment period. Then the draft EA is updated based on those comments. Again, we review all comments, and a final environmental assessment, or EA, is prepared. After the environmental process is complete, then the new procedures discussed today move on to the facility preparation and publication phases of the project. And you can imagine, with the National Airspace System across the entire United States and beyond, as vast as it is, there is a lot of things in line to get published and charted, and those happen on a regular basis. So part of this, we're working now to kind of build those holes into the pipeline, if you will, for down the road. And again, we talked about late summer 2023 is our target for getting to that point. So that's kind of the process between now and then, how we get there. And you, our viewers, and our community members in San Antonio and the surrounding areas are really vital to us doing that the best we can, the safest we can, and to make it the best operation we can for you. So please let us hear from you throughout all of those phases. Garrick, here's a question that maybe you can help me with, if you don't mind, sir. The viewer says, I saw the term OPD in the video. Can you talk about what that is and how airplanes will land?
All right, so OPD, I'll say again, it's optimized profile descent, and optimized is, I'll just say, is trying to be as efficient as possible. So these aircraft are on these procedures. Let's just say a STAR, a terminal, a standard terminal arrival route. So aircraft are arriving into San Antonio. And I'll just give an example of one of our major arrival routes is from over San Marcos. And so these aircraft will be on this optimized profile descent over San Marcos at 13,000 feet. And they'll essentially be able to set their thrust at idle all the way down, down to the runway, but down to close into the airport and into the terminal environment environment. And so they'll be higher and quieter essentially the majority of the time. And so that's going to reduce the nose profile that everyone's been talking about. So it's all computerized. There's all predetermined. I think Travis had mentioned about different waypoints and that we were not able to use previously without using satellites. And now we're able to add a whole bunch of waypoints or settings all along this track down towards San Antonio from San Marcos. So from the northeast to the southwest. And we're able to add restrictions. So these aircraft are supposed to cross these certain waypoints at different altitudes and at certain speeds. And the airlines have run simulations in different environments. I won't go into all the details, but they've done a lot of work about running simulations on all these profiles. I'll just say like the aircraft coming in from San Marcos, and they work great, and they're going to meet the airline needs.
Great, thanks, Garrick. I appreciate
Welcome.
that. So Trey, let me probe that a little bit from a pilot perspective, if you don't mind. So, and I've got a related question. I'm going to kind of blend the two of them. So we got 3-letter identifiers here for OPD, and Garrick talked about that being optimized profile descent and what being optimized was. And he talked about the waypoints and how that goes in. Our other question is, how does a pilot fly an RNP versus being vectored? And can all of Southwest Fleet fly RNP? So I know I'm throwing a bunch of stuff at you, but maybe if you can kind of blend all that together and talk about how the aircraft's flight management system flies the aircraft versus you hand flying it, and how that relates to RNP and OPD and those sorts of things.
Yeah, sure. And thanks for that, Rob. Thanks for kind of loading that question up.
Sorry.
There's actually several questions in there, but
Right.
So RNP is a type of approach. It's kind of a highly specified GPS approach, and vectoring is a tool that air traffic controllers use to move airplanes around and position them either for an approach or other needs that air traffic has. I think where the question, at least how I understood it, where it's going is really, kind of where do they meet and how do they interact? Well, a lot of RMP procedures reduce the need for vectoring or eliminate it completely, depending on the location, depending on the procedures themselves. And the second part of your question is all of Southwest's fleet equipped to fly RMP? The answer is yes. We are 100% of the fleet is equipped, and 100% of the pilots are trained. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, that's perfect. And I apologize for kind of putting them together, but they seem to kind of fit. And I know that from my experience of being a controller, that when a controller gives you a vector, then you turn and you fly that heading, right? If they assign you fly a 280 heading or whatever, and if you're flying this approach, then you're like Garrick and Travis and you have described, the aircraft's navigation system and autopilots are all working together to fly the published approach all the way down. So I just thought that might help our viewers get a picture for some of the difference and how we would use the different tools. And Travis did a great job earlier describing the times when vectors come into play, and those are shown on the boards. If you recall during the video, and I encourage you to go back and look at it, the shaded areas, they're kind of shaded yellow and they're kind of shaded pink for arrivals and departures. And those are the areas where, as Travis described, that controllers need to either separate, say, the departures that Travis described from runway 4 from the Randolph arrivals, for example. One example of where we would use vectors. Weather and other things are in there too. So thank you for everybody kind of combining there. I think that's helping our viewers get a good picture of how we utilize these tools and how they improve safety. So thank you very much for that. Steve, here's a question for you at the airport. And our viewer says, will the environmental assessment study generate a new noise map for San Antonio Airport?
If I understand it correctly, and this is really something that Christy could address, but it will not generate new contours for the airport or for the residents. We generally only get new noise exposure map contours every 5 years. And it takes a huge effort, and the EA noise analysis effort will contain a dot map analysis screening tool, I think, that reflects 1.5 decibel increases in noise. But other than that, I would have to lean on Christy Rigotti and the other environmental specialists to say what the noise analysis of the EA is.
And I think Steve wasn't there a Part 150 process that was just concluded with y'all?
Yes, that's another reason we're not doing one is we just finished one, and that's available on our website. We have, if you look for San Antonio Airport noise exposure map or NEM, you probably will get right to our site. I can't quote the web address right off the top of my head, but it's easy to find, and you can see our current noise maps, which I don't think are going to be affected by these procedures because the procedures are all close to the airport. But if they are affected, the main effect would be that the flight paths near the airport would be condensed or narrower. And I don't see the average noise changing, which is what the noise exposure map measures.
Great. Thanks, Steve. I really appreciate that. So it's great to hear the Part 150 process just concluded, and we don't expect any new noise maps. So that's awesome. Thanks, Steve. Appreciate that. So Travis, here's a question that may be for you and possibly Trey. Our viewer says on the video, it shows stars that are called waypoints. And it looks like there's a lot of these for each procedure. How do airplanes fly to these, and how do they know which waypoint to fly to? You're muted, Travis.
Sorry, I was muted there for a second. Yeah, so the waypoints are all built onto here, and typically these waypoints were put here for a reason. It's where we need the altitude. We need a specific altitude or a specific speed at this waypoint, and it's kind of like connect the dots. We know the route that or the way I put it earlier that you mentioned is these arrivals or these stars are like highways in the sky that lead to San Antonio. And there's a couple of ways that airplanes can get into San Antonio depending on what direction they're coming from. And we made up that route by putting dots on the map or these waypoints. And then each one of these waypoints will tell the pilot, oh, at this waypoint, I need to be at this airspeed, I need to be at this altitude. And that's specifically what each waypoint is for. And those waypoints are published and put in a database in the GPS in the airplane, just like it is in your car or your phone. They update that regularly, and so if we make changes, they see the changes on their end and their their navigation system.
Great, thank you, appreciate that. Trey, anything you want to add from a pilot perspective?
You know, Travis hit it pretty much dead on, but the only thing I will add is that yes, it does get coded into our navigation database, and that's what basically provides the order, if you will, the waypoint sequence, and then all of the affiliated restrictions associated with the procedures. But also the procedure gets charted either by the FAA or a navigation service provider such as Jeppesen. And from the pilot seat, what we do is we'll use the chart and brief that against what's in the navigation database, you know, to ensure accuracy. And we do that for every SID star approach that we fly, and that's our procedure anyway from the pilot seat.
Great, thank you both. Appreciate that. Garrick, here's a question that I think you can help me with, if you don't mind, please. Our viewer says, when you say these procedures are safer, what does that mean? And is it safer for the passengers or people on the ground?
Well, the procedures, old and new, the existing procedures and the new procedures are extremely safe. So safety is not sacrificed at all with the existing and the new. But the new procedures that we're proposing, and we've been talking about satellite, they provide a more precise and efficient, predictable path as opposed to our current. There's more of a, I guess, a buffer, you would say. And so it's a wider expanse, whereas these now are more precise. The precision of the ground-based navigation aids, they diminish over distance. And I gave an example last night, and I'll try and do the same thing as I was explaining. The difference between satellite and ground-based. If you're on a road trip and you're cheap like me and you don't have satellite radio, you're going to have to dial in a radio station. And then when it diminishes, it fades away. You have to dial into another radio station. Well, that's ground-based radio. That's the same concept, as opposed to if you have a satellite radio in your car, in your vehicle, you can go across the country and never have to change anything at all. And that's the exact same thing with satellite-based navigation and ground-based navigation.
Great. Thanks, Garrick. That's great. What a great explanation. That really clarified it for me. Thank you very much. The analogy to the radio stations was perfect. That's awesome. So folks, thank you so much for your questions you submitted. We've gotten lots of great questions, and we don't want you to go home tonight or leave this session without asking anything on your mind. So if there's anything at all, please submit it. And don't forget, you can submit those questions by entering them into the Q&A section or question and answer section on Zoom. Or if you're joining us from Facebook, Twitter, or YouTube, please use the Google form that's on your screen. And we really want to hear from you, so please submit your questions. And Garrick, while I've got you, if you don't mind, here's another question that maybe you can help me with. Viewer says there is no mention of Kelly Field and Stinson Field. How do they fit into the instrument departure and arrival procedures?
Well, the instrument approaches are changing only at San Antonio International. I would say changing, they're being updated is a better term. Now the arrivals inbound to Stinson, aircraft can use some of these arrivals, but they terminate at a certain point in the air, and that's where the controllers will then have to issue vectors or turns, as we discussed earlier, using compass headings, and get them to Stinson Airport, and then they'll pick up an instrument approach procedure to land to the runway. If with Kelly's military, and just like Randolph Air Force Base, their instrument approach procedures are not changing, and they really aren't linked to some of them are, but depending on aircraft, I don't want to go into too much detail, but based on equipment in the aircraft, some of the civilian versions of the military aircraft will be able to use kind of some of the procedures, but primarily no, it's status quo.
Great, thank you, appreciate that. So Trey, here's a question that maybe you can help us with about flying the aircraft. And it says, for the new arrival procedures, how do the aircraft descent rates and speeds differ from the legacy procedures?
Yeah, thanks, Rob. It really, based on what I've seen, there really shouldn't be a large variance in descent rate or speeds. Obviously, the speed piece of it is going to map back to whatever procedural needs air traffic builds into the procedures. But as far as we can tell, so far, we aren't forecasting any big changes there. But our basically what we call our VNAV software, but our airplanes and the automation are going to basically target for an idle descent and reduce the amount of level offs along the way down.
Great. So Trey, tell me a little bit about what happens when you level off. So if you have to level off, I mean, that makes sense to me. You're going to level off, but what's that do kind of with power settings and noise and speeds and sort of thing when you have to do that?
Yeah. So obviously we as an airline, everything is very concerned about fuel these days, right? And so the more time we can spend at idle, the better, because it's less fuel burn, less carbon emissions in the atmosphere, and then obviously a reduction in noise. If a procedure, was designed, that incorporated, level segments, those level segments, once the airplane levels off, throttle would come up, more noise, so forth. And so we certainly, from the airline standpoint, appreciate the efforts to design the OPDs.
Great, thank you. Appreciate that explanation. I know our viewers do as well. Travis, here's a question from a viewer that says, will the new procedures impact the runway arrival and departure goal percentages?
So I'm not sure exactly what you mean by the goal percentages. I'm going to go with, will this impact? I'm a guess. Will this impact which runways we're using, and the frequency of them? As we talked about earlier, the primary reason for what runway we use is based upon the wind. Airplanes need to take off and land into the wind primarily. There is some component of tailwind and crosswind that they can use. So we will generally be using the runway that is most aligned with the prevailing winds, and that will change with the seasons and with weather patterns and things like that. We will also take into account efficiency, pilot requests, things like that. They have some other things that they'll look into. But these really, these procedures, the winds are not going to change. And everything in close to the airport as far as arriving and departing really isn't changing. So the short answer is nothing there is going to change. It's all going to be based upon the wind. And hopefully that was what the question was about.
Great. Thanks, Travis. I appreciate that. And Steve, if you don't mind, let me kind of parlay that to you on the same question, if you don't mind. I know earlier we talked about voluntary noise procedures, but does San Antonio have anything other than that? Is there some kind of goal around which runway we use, how much of the time, or some sort of other noise procedure?
No, at this time, we have not asked for Part 161 procedures or equivalent usage of the runway. And so the runway we use the most faces southeast because the wind comes from the southeast most of the time. And in the winter, the wind comes from the northeast, and we use runway 422 a lot in the winter. And the rest of the time, the wind rotates around. And I'm oversimplifying what Travis just said, but basically the percentage of time that we use the runways is not going to change except when we do the decouple and lengthening of runway 13R. And then at that time, there will be a remarkably different noise pattern that will emerge because of the temporary cessation of usage of 422. I hope that's what you meant.
Yeah, that makes sense. I just, thank you very much. Just trying to make sure that there wasn't some goal or other thing that the city had around runway usage or some formalized departure procedures or noise abatement procedures out there. So thank you very much for clarifying that. I appreciate that. So Steve, maybe you can help me with this one. Let me start and then I'll hand it off to you as well. This viewer asked, if someone wants to make a noise complaint, how do they do that? So there's a couple ways. And first, you can go to faa.gov/noise, and there's a wealth of information on that page. And I would encourage you to do that. You can contact either the FAA through that faa.gov/noise page. And like I said, there's a lot of wealth of information, but there's also a link to what we call the noise portal. And in the noise portal, there's an opportunity. You'll see it. It's very obvious. You can click on that and enter your comments there. All of those comments do get reviewed by our teams and investigated. So that is one way to do it. Now, Steve, I know the other way that folks can do is they can contact San Antonio Airport. Tell us about how that works and maybe where they can call and kind of how that process works for you all.
We have a noise hotline that we set up so that people can call in. And the number is 210-207-3471, or you can call, or you can email us at Airport Noise Hotline, all one word, Airport Noise Hotline at sanantonio.gov. And we will do our best to help you answer your questions, whether it's about PBN or just generally about noise or construction. We answer a broad variety of questions at the San Antonio Airport. And we're happy to do it.
Great, thanks, Stephen. I know that's what you do every day. So likely you may catch that question when our viewers write in. So thank you, Steve. I appreciate that very much. Garrick, maybe you can help me with this one, please. Our viewer asks, are you putting in these procedures so San Antonio can operate more flights?
Well, I'll go back to what I was talking about. I think there was a question earlier about separation standards. So the separation standards have not changed, nor will they change in any foreseeable future. So we still have to maintain that. And so these procedures are not necessarily going to allow more aircraft into the airport, but it's going to allow them to get to the airport more efficiently. And like I've mentioned before, it's optimized. It's a lot more efficient, and computers are going to be, the pilot's going to be using the computers more, and it's going to be a lot more efficient for everyone all the way around, and much safer.
Great. Thanks, Garrick. Appreciate that. Travis, maybe you can help me with this one. Our viewer asks, what happens if the satellite network goes down? What kind of backup does the FAA have to direct airplanes?
Yeah, so there will still be some of the existing ground-based nav aids. There's a whole plan, national plan for that, for them to still be used. There won't be as many as they begin to decommission those, but there will be enough as a backup. And then, we'll still have radar. We still will be using radar to tell airplanes where to go. And, at the very least, what we do is we do it the way we're doing it today. We tell them which heading to fly on their compass, and we tell them what altitude and what speed to maintain, and we do it that way.
Great, thank you, appreciate that. So Garrick, let me jump back to you. Here's a question from a viewer that talks about when an airplane is at about 2,500 feet, will it be arriving at an unchanging path to the runway about 5 miles away? In essence, will it fly above the same houses every time?
All right, so when a plane is around 2,500 feet, the aircraft will be generally on final, if not close to being established on final. And on final meaning straight into the runway. They're flying straight to the runway, a straight line. So that generally will not actually be changing pretty much. So I think I answered that one. It's an unchanging path around 5 miles away. And so all it's going to do is it's going to be, like I said, it's going to be precise. It's going to maintain that 3-degree descent rate to the runway, and it's going to be a stable approach. And that's what of things that have come up in the last, I would say more than a few years, around 5 years, is the term stable approach. Is the airlines would like to be established on final at a decent point away from the airport to be, I'll just say, wings level. In other words, they've already turned the final, they're straight into the airport, and they like to be established so before they make their descent. And so aircraft are able to do that. And pretty much that's really not changing at San Antonio.
Great. Thanks, Garrick. Let me probe that just a little bit. So you mentioned 3-degree glide angle. Is that different than what we have today with these new procedures?
That is not changing a bit. It's all 3-degree descent rate at San Antonio and for all runways. And so there is no change whatsoever.
Great, thanks. Trey, let me, if you don't mind, let me pick your brain for just a second on the stable approach part. So from a pilot perspective, Garrick did a great job of describing that. What does that mean for you to be on a stable approach out there, and why is that important?
Well, we're delving into more of a company policy. All of the airlines have their own company policy as it pertains to stabilized approach. But, for us, there's a number of factors that go into it. Depending on the type of approach being used, in general, we want to be at 1,000 feet. We want to be on our target speed, on the approach, and there's other parameters, like throttle setting and so forth, and fully configured for landing and such. And so for us, from an airline standpoint, we're either stable or we're going around. And so I probably a little bit more than where you were going with that. But I mean, there's quite a few factors that all come together from our standpoint that our pilots have to manage every day around the system.
Yeah, that's great, Trey. Thank you for that explanation. So if I'm hearing you right, it's all about safety, right? It's all about being in a safe configuration, right?
That's 100% what it's about, is safety. Yep.
Perfect. Thanks. And that's for Garrick and Trey. Thank you very much. You all did a great job of helping me understand how air traffic control and the operators like Trey in the aircraft work together to maintain the system safety. And a lot of the procedures that we're proposing and talking about here are going to continue to enhance that for us. So great stuff, guys. Thank you very much. Travis, here's a question that for you. It says it was mentioned that the proposed procedures will reduce noise for arriving aircraft. So the question is, will it also reduce noise for departing aircraft?
These procedures don't necessarily change anything about our departures in close to the airport, where you're going to hear the airplanes. People are mostly going to hear the airplanes in the immediate vicinity of the airport. The airplanes still today, just like they do today, when these procedures go into effect, they're still going to be, again, runway heading. The turbojet and jet powered airplanes are still going to be straight out, aligned with the runway that they departed from until they're at least 3,000 feet, unless we have to turn them for safety reasons. So the short answer to that is no, they don't affect the noise pattern as a departure.
Great, thanks. And Travis, while I've got you, here's another question that says, can these procedures be used in all types of weather? And do thunderstorms affect the use of these procedures?
These procedures can be used in all types of weather. Generally with thunderstorms, we could still use them in the thunderstorms, but pilots generally will not fly through thunderstorms. So they generally don't want to be anywhere near the thunderstorms. And so these procedures may temporarily be discontinued while a thunderstorm moves through, because if the thunderstorm is on one of the paths of these, that's where the air traffic controllers are really having to go back to manually controlling where these airplanes are going to go, because the weather is moving, the weather is building, it begins to diminish in one part, build in another. And so that's where we see it from a bird's eye view on a radar scope, where the weather is at. The pilots also can see where the weather's at on their weather radar. And we work as a team with the pilot to make sure that we keep them clear of that weather. And it may result in us removing or taking them off of these flight paths to go around weather.
Great. Thanks, Travis. Appreciate that. And folks, great questions, man. A timely question. I think we have a front moving through North Texas. It'll be in the San Antonio area overnighted into tomorrow with some thunderstorms. So very timely questions and great answers. Folks, just keep sending them to us. We're loving those questions. If you're on Facebook, Twitter, or YouTube, use the Google form that's on your screen. And if you're on Zoom with us, use the Q&A section to enter your questions. We'd love them and keep them coming. So Garrick, here's another one we just got in. It says, will these new procedures reduce the FAA allowing aircraft to deviate from approach paths, i.e. cutting the corners?
All right, so one of the many reasons why I chose air traffic control as a career is because each day is completely different. I see Trey smiling there, and that's exactly what it is. It's different. And I really enjoy that. There's always something different. So these procedures are establishing continuity, and which creates safety. It's added safety, and you're reducing the risk. And we always want to reduce risk or mitigate risk. So what we do also is we have 1, 2, 3, 4 points in our airspace, and outside of our airspace, where aircraft will arrive from outlying areas. And these 4 paths all eventually have to join up to one straight line to a runway. And so air traffic control has to do their due diligence and sequence and turn and adjust altitudes and do whatever they have to do to get these aircraft lined up safely using the FAA separation standards down to the runway. So yes, we do cut the corners. I'll say that's a term. We're cutting the corner, and we have to make a determination. We have this aircraft coming in. If this aircraft is by itself, there's no one in front of this aircraft, and they're further out, by all means, we're going to send this aircraft direct to another one of those new waypoints that we've established closer to the final approach course to get to the airport, to get to land quicker. And so this helps reduce the fuel burn. Actually, it'll help aircraft stay higher and lower and higher, and they'll be able to descend and get established on final quicker. So even at that, so also on the same instance, if there's other aircraft that we have to sequence with, either we're going to have to put in front of or behind, we'll have to make the determination and take an aircraft and take them off the procedure and put them in front, or they'll stay established If they're going to fall behind and follow the other aircraft that we were looking at, they'll just stay on the procedure established and stay on the optimized profile descent and continue into the runway.
Awesome. Thanks, Garrick. I appreciate that. We have another question about noise levels, and this one says, how will this affect current noise levels? We talked about that a little bit earlier. So the process that we use around the environmental assessment will include a noise evaluation. So we've got the proposed procedures, and then we have the draft environmental assessment that we talked about. And don't forget that draft EA will be available for review and public comment later this year. So we encourage you to stay tuned, look for that, and provide your comments back to us around that. Now, Travis, here's a question that maybe I prompted earlier with my multiple loaded question to Trey, and maybe you can help me with it here. This one says, I see RNP mentioned, and we've also heard about PBN. What's the difference?
So PBN stands for performance-based navigation. Includes the satellite departures or satellite-based departures and arrivals, which is what we're talking about here in our approach procedures. Within PBN, there are two main categories of navigation methods or specifications: area navigation, or commonly referred to as RNAV, and required navigational performance, or the RNP. In this context, the term RNAV means specific navigation or specific navigation specification with a specified lateral accuracy value, or really a fancy way of saying the aircraft, it's special systems on board the aircraft to make sure that they're going to be able to fly it to within a certain mileage, whether it be 0.3 miles or 1 mile or 5 miles, with it for the majority of the time of the flight time.
Great. Thanks, Travis. I appreciate that. So folks, don't forget, we're still taking questions. Don't miss the session. Don't leave the session without asking the question that's burning in the back of your mind. We want to hear from you. We'll continue to take questions through the remainder of the hour. And team in the back, if you could, let's bring up the comment board, if you don't mind again, because we have a question that just came in that relates to that. It says, how do we continue to stay informed on what's happening with these procedures and potential noise impacts? So don't forget, the public workshops that we did yesterday and this one today are both being recorded for future viewing. You can see them on Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter, or our community engagement webpage, which can be found at faa.gov. Yesterday's recording is already available, and today's recording will be available immediately after the meeting concludes tonight. Any updates to materials will be found on the FAA's project website. You can see here on how to comment. Again, there's the faa.gov address. You can see the underscores now on there between air traffic and community and engagement. You can send a snail mail at the address you see there on the bottom left or the left-hand side of the screen there in Fort Worth, Texas. And if you're like me and you like it easy, scan the QR code that's right there. That'll take you to the webpage, and I'll tell you when we get near the end of the session a little bit more about navigating that webpage and where to enter your comments there. But team, thanks for bringing up that screen. I really do appreciate that. So Travis, here's a question from a viewer that says, how has the FAA made changes like this at other airports?
Well, this is definitely nothing new. It's been done at a whole bunch of other airports, and this process started several years ago with our airport, and it's something that's going across the entire national airspace system slowly. It's a big project, so it takes time. We put a lot of studying into it, a lot of work into it, and worked with the users and the air carriers to make sure that the things that we're doing are going to work. And it's been a long process, but it's being done everywhere else, and we're learning as we go. Part of us getting together and having these meetings is we go over the lessons learned, where they say, hey, that the team that's doing these, they say, hey, this has been an issue at this city or with this airport. Some of the ways that we've connected arrivals with approaches that's problematic at some of the airports. So we look at the way we did that here and make sure that we're trying to stay ahead of issues.
Great. Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. So here's a question that says, can you tell us again when these procedures are scheduled to start? So again, we're shooting for implementation in late summer 2023. We talked again about the environmental assessment. The process is for that. The draft EA will come out. We'll be looking for your comments there. And then once we review those and we make any adjustments as needed, then the process heads into the facility production and implementation phase. And again, we're looking for that implementation in the late summer of 2023. Thanks for that question. Great question. So team in the back, if you can bring up slide 7 for me. Here's a question that Garrick, maybe you can help me with, and we'll use this depiction. The question says, can you show the board with arrivals over the western part of the city and explain the yellow area? Planes, will they still fly in this area?
Sure. Okay. So like we said, the yellow is lines are dispersion areas, and they are arriving to San Antonio. And what this looks like is I see it on runway 13 right. So aircraft are so the yellow lines to the west are predominantly from aircraft arriving from the south, going northbound, and then making a left turn to the northwest. And then air traffic controllers are vectoring them. And that's the dispersion area where I was talking earlier about air traffic controllers making a decision whether they're going to be in front of other aircraft or they're going to follow aircraft. And that's what we do. That's what those yellow lines are creating. They're being broken off the procedure for safety, because there are established rules and there are established separation standards that we still need to maintain. And so that's what we're doing as air traffic controllers. We're making things happen.
Great. Thanks, Garrick. I appreciate that. So while the slide is still up, if y'all will leave it up, can you bring it back up for me? We're gonna talk about that slide for just a second. So in addition to the question that we just talked about, we had a question last night that talked about asking where these procedures were related to where they lived. And so I just wanted to point out, as you go back and look at the recordings that we just talked about, these slides are in there and you'll be able to pause that recording. And if you're on a computer, you can probably zoom in. I just wanted to take just a second to talk about, you can see major highways, interstates are depicted on here. You can see some of the larger lakes, bodies of water, some of the larger rivers are on there. So hopefully with those land-based features, in addition to the depictions of the runways for San Antonio and Randolph, for example, you'll get a really good picture of where these flight tracks are related to where you live. And that's part of really what we wanted you to capture tonight. As you go back and look at the recording and give us your comments eventually, we want you to know exactly where that is. So Garrick, thanks for describing the yellow shaded area. If you recall, folks, on the departures, they're kind of a pink or a purpley colored shaded area. Similar thing. Those are the dispersion areas. You can see the flight tracks, you can see the waypoints, and hopefully the pictures overlaid on the surface features where you can get a really good picture of where that is relative to where you are and where those aircraft are flying. So team, thank you for hanging on that slide. I appreciate that. I threw them a curveball for viewers in the back. They weren't expecting that. And we've got the top-notch crew working that's doing a fantastic job helping us out. So thank you very much for that. So Travis, let's move on to the next question that just came in here. It says the words arrival and approach were used. What's the difference between those two?
Sure. So, I mean, it was actually shown on that last slide. If they could pull that back up, not absolutely necessary, but it might give someone a visual there. But that chart actually showed the difference between an arrival and approach. So the arrivals were shown, I believe, in orange. The arrival is, I like to refer to it as a highway in the sky. It's where everybody that's coming into San Antonio in the air is on that arrival procedure. That is the procedure that will guide airplanes essentially almost to the airport. And then, like Garrick said, then we're going to take over manually from there and kind of put them all in line and in order for the runway and line them up with the runway. Getting lined up with the runway is really where the second part of that question is the approach. That is the approach, or what we'll refer to as the final approach. And we will use vectors and compass headings to get the airplane turned onto that final and line them up with the runway. And then the approach takes over from there, where the pilots will use navigation systems that will guide them all the way down to basically 100 feet from the runway where they will land the airplane.
Great. Thanks, Travis. I appreciate that. So we'll bring that slide back up here again before we're done tonight, and maybe we'll circle back and look at that one more time. So Garrick, here's a question that maybe you can help me with. It says, how do satellite-based procedures enhance safety?
Okay, so these new procedures, the arrivals, I'm trying to come up with the word here. Let's see. Okay, they're predetermined. Everything's predetermined. It's already established altitudes and speeds. And so what that does is right now, the controllers are on our existing procedures. We're having to make a lot of excessive transmissions. The new procedures that we're proposing will reduce the communication, all the transmissions that the controllers have to make to the pilots, because the pilots already have that stuff loaded, all that information preloaded in their on their computer systems. And the airplane, the computer systems will make sure that those are compliant. They're going to be compliant all the way in close to the airport. It's going to create a greater navigational precision. It reduces that buffer that I was talking about earlier. It's more of a straight line instead of a buffer area. We know exactly where those aircraft are going to be at. And it reduces the controller workload, especially during the busy times. Less transmissions. The aircraft will just be monitoring these aircraft coming in. And then when they're closer in, they'll have to make the determination whether they're going to vector the aircraft or leave them on the procedure.
Great. Thanks, Garrick. I appreciate that. Travis, here's a question that maybe you can help me with. It says, will these changes be permanent, or could the routes change again in the future?
Well, the routes could always change. We're doing our best to set them up right now to where they will serve us for many years to come, so that we're not having to do this again. But if for whatever reason the airspace changes or the airport realigns a runway, I mean, there's anything that could happen. We may have to come back in the future and adjust these, but we'll follow the same process that we're doing now with the environmental study, the community outreach, and things like that.
Great. Thank you. Appreciate that. So here's one, Travis, for either you or Garrick, either one. It has to do with helicopters. So will helicopters fly in the same locations as before, Garrick?
I'll take it. Yes. There's no change. So we have close into the airport, we have 5 procedures, and we have them named based on like McAllister Park or the different procedures going north, south, east, and west. And those will not change. Now, the aircraft that are the helicopters that are transitioning all around point to point, they're primarily EMS or police helicopters, and they fly point to point. They need to get to their destination and return in an expedited, they need to be an expedited flight, and that's what we do. We try and service that and accommodate them and try not to deviate them at all unless safety overrides anything. But no, helicopters are going to be the status quo. There's no change.
Okay, great. Thanks, Garrick. I appreciate that. So Travis, here's another question, and maybe if our team in the back can bring up slide 7 again that we talked about a minute ago with the in your great description, Travis. We have another question, but maybe they'll all kind of go together here for you. Our viewer asks, it looks like some of these stars tie into an approach, but the graphics show an area of dispersion. Why can't all the aircraft stay on the procedure? Now, Garrick talked about that a little bit earlier, but maybe if we can get that slide back up, you can kind of talk about that, and then also your approach and the other question you talked about, Travis.
Yeah, sure. So obviously, whenever we can, we'll leave aircraft on the procedure because it gives the predictability. It lets them stay higher for longer, and it ultimately would be the shortest path to the runway. That being said, aircraft are coming from all sorts of different directions, and we have a variety of aircraft that fly into San Antonio from slow, meaning maybe 70 or 80 knots when they're flying, to 250 knots on the arrival. So that's where we come in as controllers, and we have to keep those aircraft separated. That's not, when you're driving in your car and there's traffic, there's a stoplight. The one side of the street stops and the other gets to go, and then the other airplanes can't stop. So what that dispersion area is it's really where maybe we're buying time. We're moving airplanes around other airplanes If you're coming in from the northeast there on that Cuervo arrival, and maybe you're kind of fast and someone a little bit slower is already inbound to San Antonio, maybe on that Duncan arrival from the northwest. If we left that Cuervo arrival on the procedure, eventually they're going to meet. And that's primarily, that is our goal as air traffic controllers, is for airplanes to continue to stay separated. And so in that example, that Duncan arrival may continue into San Antonio. We try to have them go as fast as they can. We'll slow down that Cuervo arrival, but ultimately, if that Cuervo arrival cannot turn towards the runway yet, they're going to end up in that yellow area. And that's where we're manually taking over the procedure and assigning airspeeds and altitudes and headings to build that spacing in.
Great. Thanks, Travis. I appreciate that. And as we've made our way through our time, we've got enough time for one more question. So Travis and Garrick, maybe if you guys could both, I'd be interested in your perspectives on this one. How do you know the new procedures will be safe?
Sure. I'll start that one. I've been part of the development team on these since we began several years ago. And I know that what we did was we took the existing procedures that we're flying today, and you can kind of see that from on that last slide where the existing flight tracks are at today. And we pretty much put that line right in the middle of where they're at. The airplanes are where we're already used to them being. The difference is I'm not having to issue those instructions time and time again, over and over and over, to every airplane that flies through there. Those airplanes will have that route predetermined for them and loaded into their navigation database. Furthermore, once we had a rough idea how these were going to work, the airplanes that are actually going to fly these, the airlines took these, flew them in simulators under various conditions to make sure that it was possible and safe for the airplanes to do. And we made changes based off of making it ideal for the aircraft that will be flying in and out of San Antonio. So without a doubt, I have no doubt in my mind that they're going to be safe.
Awesome. Garrick, how about any additional thoughts from you, sir?
Well, Travis pretty much hit it as usual, right on the spot. This has been in the study and in the process for years now. And so we aren't the first facility or city to have this take place, all the new procedures and stuff. So we're not reinventing anything. It's just we're adapting all the existing things, the satellite navigation, the precision navigation to San Antonio. And the airlines, they've flown this. I think Travis had mentioned that they've run simulations and they've all agreed that this is going to work for them. It's going to be much safer. Aircraft are going to fly. If they're going to stay on the procedure, they're going to stay higher and quieter.
Awesome. Thank you both. I appreciate that. And here at the FAA, our North Star is safety. Our first priority is always safety. And in partnership with our operators in the system and at the airports, that is our focus, is safety. And that's what it's all about. So thank you all for being here very much. I really appreciate your expertise. It's just fantastic. We're now at the end of the workshop. Thank you for attending. We've heard many great questions, and I hope our answers have been informative. If you'd like to view this workshop again, please visit the FAA platforms on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. But this isn't the end of our communication. We also want to remind you that the FAA is performing an environmental assessment to analyze potential environmental impacts. Once we have the results of that study, we will be sharing them with you. We also want you to know that you may comment on this proposal. You can please go to our website shown on the screen. And again, that's FAA.gov/air_traffic/community_engagement/SANANT and a /. I know it's a long one, but you'll see it on the when you look at the recording and you review that, so it'll be there easy for you to use. An alternative is to go straight to FAA.gov and search for San Antonio. There you can click on the community engagement link, or if you have your phone handy, simply scan the QR code on your screen and it'll take you to the website. Now, I promised you some additional details once you get there. Once you get to the page, scroll to the bottom and you'll see a link that you can click to submit your comments. Or if you prefer, there's a mailing address and you can mail your comments to us. But please note, all comments must be received by the June 30th, 2022. So again, many options of how to get your comments. We want to hear from you, and please get them to us. We need to receive them by June 30th, 2022. Well, once again, I want to thank our specialists for providing their expertise. Steve from San Antonio Airport, Trey from Southwest Airlines, Travis and Garrick from the San Antonio Air Traffic Control Tower, and Vivian, our Spanish translator. Thank you so much. You all were amazing. Remember, this workshop has been recorded, and recording, including all of the slides, the addresses, the QR code, it's all there available on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter right after we conclude here in just a few minutes. Thank you for being here, and have a great evening.